DZUP Special Features.
Magandang umaga. Narito tayo sa DZUP Special Features. Ako muli si Gian Librojo. Samahan kaming pakinggan muli ang symposium na The Vernacular in Philippine Literature, Dance, Stage, and Radio, The Roots of Transcultural Philippine Music, na ginanap noong February 17 sa Abelardo Hall Auditorium ng UP College of Music. Pakinggan natin ang Colonial Radio and Filipino Music Lecture kay Dr. Elizabeth Enriquez kasamang pagtatampok ng UP Jazz Band sa pagdidirihe ni Professor Raven Maige at music transcription at arrangements ni Trina Cayabyab. Ito'y handog sa atin ng UP College of Music, UP Diliman Office for Initiatives in Culture and the Arts, at UP Office of the Vice President for Academic Affairs. Ating muling pakinggan.
So now we're on to our last speaker. We have Dr. Elizabeth Enriquez. Dr. Elizabeth Enriquez is a professor of broadcasting in the UP College of Mass Communication, where she has been teaching for 26 years in courses on media theory, media literacy, media history, and media and gender. Among her publications is the groundbreaking book titled Appropriation of Colonial Broadcasting, A History of Early Radio in the Philippines from 1922 to 1946, which was released in 2008. She is one of the principal editors of the broadcast volume in the forthcoming Cultural Center of the Philippines Encyclopedia of Philippine Art, 2nd edition. She obtained her BA Journalism, MA Broadcasting, and PhD Philippine Studies, all degrees, from UP Diliman. She was a visiting researcher in the U.S. as a Fulbright Scholar in 2001 to 2002, and as Senior Fulbright Scholar in 2011 to 2012. Among the administrative positions she held in UP are Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Director of the UP Diliman Information Office. She currently chairs the Commission on Higher Education Technical Committee on Broadcasting. Before she joined the UP as a member of the faculty, she was a radio and television broadcaster for almost 2 decades. We would like to and her paper is on colonial radio and Filipino music. To continue, the abstract of our paper is titled Colonial Radio and Filipino Music. Radio broadcasting, which the Americans introduced to the Philippines in 1922, was quite successful in its project of promoting the English language and Western music during the American colonial period. Apart from playing imported music on the air, radio featured Filipino musical artists deftly performing Western pieces. However, the new medium also became an opportunity to re-express Filipino music and Filipino languages, especially Tagalog, to a nationwide audience. A flowering of the Condiman and Philippine folk songs was attributed to radio, while local composers who scored movies created new Condiman pieces, even if some adopted the American idiom in film scoring, popularizing these pieces through radio. Meanwhile, the alternative genres of local novelty songs and pastiches of popular American music and Filipino, as well as Spanish music, gained immense exposure on the air. The incipient record industry broadened the reach and popularity of the Filipino musical artists by providing radio stations with reliable content that augmented live performances, which in turn helped keep alive the renewed and growing appreciation for both traditional and new Filipino music. In notable cases, songs that posed a radical resistance to the colonial condition were heard on the behalf of Dr. Enriquez.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Both the American colonial administration and the American business community were hopeful about the introduction of radio in the Philippines in 1922. The American Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines said that splendid vistas of utility, progress, and education were opened up by the news that radio communication is about to be taken up on a practical commercial scale. The Americans expected radio to produce what they termed marvelous change, as every hamlet, no matter how small and distant, can be put into instantaneous touch with the center of the country's business, industrial, social, and educational activities. The Americans said that with news, lectures on all imaginable topics, concerts, and information campaigns through broadcasting, the country could be made more homogeneous and thus more efficient. Calling radio a tremendous impetus for civilization, American businessmen in Manila imagined overwhelming possibilities for commerce and considered radio a new and important force for progress. No doubt, the business circles expected radio to boost commercial activity in the islands, and those who invested in broadcasting hoped that the new venture would be a profitable one. The colonial administration was equally optimistic and eager to exploit the new medium of broadcasting. In 1932, when Governor General Theodore Roosevelt Jr. arrived in Manila, he suggested that radio broadcasting be used for the dissemination of information to remote towns and villages of the islands. He called for the purchase of radio receiving sets by municipalities and directed that the receivers be installed in public squares where communities may listen to broadcasts from Manila. Roosevelt justified the service by drawing attention to the inadequacy of transportation in the islands that prevented a quick and more massive circulation of newspapers and magazines, which until then were the traditional means of disseminating public information. He estimated the total circulation of the 3 newspapers and 2 weekly magazines at the time to be not more than 200,000 in a population of 13 million Filipinos. Roosevelt believed radio was admirably equipped to meet the situation and reach all the islands. Moreover, literacy was not a requirement in listening to radio. Roosevelt's scheme was not new, however. The colonial government had been distributing receivers to isolated areas at least since 1929 to support its obvious intent to employ radio as one of the means to Americanize Filipino consciousness in order to make the American brand of democracy acceptable to Filipinos and to project the American culture as the agent for civilizing and modernizing the Philippines, thus justifying the colonial project. Radio was a critical apparatus for the imposition of the colonial ideology on Filipinos. I propose that its significance may be put in the same category as the public school and the political system modeled after American structures, whose institutionalization in the Philippines molded the outlook of many Filipinos and made them receptive to a nation of themselves as brown Americans. One writer contends that radio and American music hastened this process. Thus, what the Americans could not do with their guns, they did with their music. Fortifying this process of Americanization was one of radio's tasks, which some Americans consciously and deliberately performed. For instance, when KZRH first went on the air in 1939, it announced the hiring of an all-American staff of announcers with experience in radio broadcasting in the United States, who will give the voice of the Philippines a genuine American accent. The broadcast stated further that the continuous use of proper English over KZRH will be of great assistance to the educational system in the islands, as it will enable students of English to check their own knowledge in diction and pronunciation. Indeed, the agenda was to craft the voice of the Philippines, which was the nickname of KZRH, to be the voice of America. This voice of America was received in homes and plazas with radios in the form of programming that was mostly entertainment, whose style and sound were patterned after American programming of that time. Americans managed the Manila radio stations and were the first announcers and musicians, as well as the engineers and technicians, thus setting the format, tone, and technical quality of programming. The English language was spread with the American sense of humor. The programs were mostly entertainment and as much as 70% consisted of music, with some programs with literary readings such as poetry, prose, and drama, or comedy skits, while other programs are of dance music and amateur singing contests. There was a small amount of news and live coverage of events like the opening of the sessions of the National Assembly, sports competitions, and talk programs. At first, the colonial administration subsidized part of the operational expenses of the new business of radio broadcasting. At the same time, radio became profitable when it became the new exciting medium for advertising beginning in the 1920s and intensifying in the 1930s, not only for local products, but especially for imported U.S. consumer goods. The first advertisers were the department store owners of the stations who invested in radio to support the primary business of retailing. For example, KZRH was put up by Hickok's department store that sold everything from fountain pens to firearms, from electric ice boxes to neckties, and from office equipment to evening gowns. As radio gained popularity, other businesses, which previously advertised only in newspapers and magazines, began buying radio airtime. By the middle of the 1930s, radio was called the super salesman of cigars, soaps, toothpastes, and other products. Commercial houses and industrial firms quickly grasped the efficiency with which radio disseminated their sales propaganda and began courting public tastes and preferences for their products through radio broadcasting. To be able to court the public, radio stations needed to fill airtime with program content from sign-on as early as 5 o'clock in the morning until sign-off as late as midnight, 7 days a week. That was about 100 hours of programming a week for each of the 4 radio stations that were on the air in the 1930s. Advertisers, of course, expected fresh programming every day to keep audiences glued to their radio sets. Recorded music imported from the United States, as well as transcriptions of or recordings of entire programs on American radio, were played on the Manila stations. The records were sent to Manila, and in the 1930s, the introduction of shortwave broadcast technology allowed the relay of some American programs to Manila via shortwave. In addition to popular American music, there were programs that featured Spanish and Latin music, marches, concert music, and classical music from Europe. However, there was not enough to fill the air. Consequently, in spite of the intent to use radio to sell America to the Philippines, the insatiable need of broadcasting for content provided an opportunity for Filipino music artists and Filipino music to fill the lack and find expression on the air as early as the late 1920s. Among the records stations invested in were those of Filipino artists. As early as the 1910s, the American recording companies Victor and Columbia had been recording Filipino folk songs for distribution to the growing Filipino community in the United States, hired as plantation workers. Filipino music artists were brought to the United States to record the songs. They also performed as guests in U.S. radio, where the audience reaction was warm. To maximize their potential for profit, Victor and Columbia sent copies of the records for distribution in the Philippines. The distributors happened to be Erlanger and Gallinger Department Store, which operated KZEG, and Ibec Department Store, which ran KZIB. One memorable recording was of Ang Maya by Maria Carpena, reportedly the very first recording of a Filipino song, recorded possibly in 1913. Here's Michelle Pascual to interpret Ang Maya.
Sa umaga, ang awitan ay mainam na pakinggan. Sa gabi na madapo, di mahuli at maliksi. Sa umaga, ang awitan ay mainam na
Unfortunately, Carpena did not hear her record played on the air as she had already passed away when radio broadcasting began in the Philippines. But the existence of her record and similar recordings of Filipino artists provided material for radio programs with a warm reception of while the warm reception of the Filipino audience encouraged the performance of other pieces of Filipino music on the air. This was aided by the beginnings of the local recording business at the time, which began to record Filipino as well as covers of American popular music. Some songs mixed English with Tagalog lyrics, as in this example, the bouncy Tagalog folk song Magtanim Ay Di Biro, with the English title Planting Rice by Philippine vaudeville queen Katie de la Cruz.
Planting rice is never fun. Bend from morn till the set of sun. Cannot stand and cannot sit. Cannot rest for a little bit. Planting rice is no fun. Bend from morn till the set of sun. Cannot stand, cannot sit. Cannot rest for a little bit. Magtanim ay di biro. Maghapoy na tayo. Di naman makatayo. Di naman makapo. Baywang ko'y nananaw. Binti ko'y namimili. Braso ko'y namimili. Babad sa dulo. Baywang ko'y nananaw. Binti ko'y namimili. Braso ko'y namamani. Pagkababad sa tubig. Halina, halina, mga kaliya. Tayo'y magsipag-unat-unat. Magpanibago tayo ng lakas para sa araw ng bukas.
Rendition was reportedly recorded initially for Filipinos in the United States in the 1920s. It was also her first known recording. The recording companies also appealed to the local Spanish community by recording some songs in Spanish, for example, Luis Garcia's Preguntas a las Estrellas. There were also combinations of English and Spanish lyrics in some songs that were originally in English. Here's one that was actually recorded for Victor Records in the late 1940s, right after the war, but possibly sung on the air live and typified the hybridization that Filipino music artists made since the American colonial period. Here's Bimbo Danao's It's Magic.
Io me l'ereti de ti sinda de mi Dios morena. Dice que nunca encontraré cariños como tú me diste vida. Si en buscar tu amor me equivoqué. Ya sabe que sin ti no calma la mi ser, que serás ya olvidar la noche cuando tu mi amor legaste. quisieras ya olivar los labios que te han a besar. Y cielo y soledad, sentí el dolor de mi pobre corazón. Recordaré que fuiste mía una vez, mi amor.
Encouraged by the enthusiastic reception by Filipinos of Philippine music talent performed on the air, stations also put on such highly regarded musical talent as the Manila Symphony Orchestra and European-trained opera singers, such as the grand diva Jovita Fuentes, who, as we know, became National Artist for Music in 1976. Fuentes performed in European operas, the first Filipina to do so, famously portraying the role of Cho-Cho San in Giacomo Puccini's Madame Butterfly. Her performances, both live and recorded, were heard on the air. Here's one piece Jovita Fuentes first performed in 1919, then subsequently made famous on the air, the Danza ay Kalisud, a heartbroken lament in song in Ilonggo.
Kalisud sang pinayaan at law gabi firmi tayo ginatangisan ahintay nawalay sing kapalaran walay gid sarang ko kalibayan ay cielo azul apatiin ka na baga bulikit au banghi ang nabilang ko sang guma mayat pang mamatay kun halos mamatay agudi ako makatumdum ngako walay kalipay.
Filipino traditional music began to be heard on the air as early as 1929. The director of the National Library, Teodoro M. Calao, wrote that the frequent airplay of local songs increased their popularity to a point where the music sheets of Kundiman outsold the music sheets of jazz. Calao praised radio for what it had done to revive the popularity of Philippine music and the consequent flowering of kundiman, balitaw, harana, and other Philippine folk songs. It should be noted that radio was, and arguably still is, the best medium to popularize a song. Of the many traditions of Philippine music, it is the kundiman that has appealed most to listeners and has actually been the most enduring and most influential on the Filipino pop music of the post-war decades. One of the more popular kundiman singers was Zarzuela's star Atang de la Rama. One of her recordings for Columbia Records is Kamuning, recorded locally by KZIB's IBEC. There were several others who attained popularity on the air more than on stage, including tenor Jose Moses Geld Santiago, who recorded some pieces in duets with female voices, one of whom was Nati Arellano. Also recorded by Columbia was their duet of Ang Dalagang Pilipina. Here, back-to-back, are Kamuning and Dalagang Pilipina.
Noong tayo ay magkahiwalay
ang tala sa umaga. Kung tanawin ay nakaliligaya, may ningning na tangi at dakilang ganda. Maging sa ugali, maging sa kumilos, mayumi, mahinhin, mabini ang lahat ng ayos, malinis ang puso, maging sa pag-irog, may tibay at tining ng loob. Bulaklak na tanging marilag, ang bango ay humahalimuyak, sa mundo'y dakilang ang hiyas. Pang-aliw sa pusong may hirap, batis ng ligaya at galak, hantungan ng madlang pangarap. Iyan ang dalagang Pilipina, karapat-dapat sa isang tunay na pagsinta.
An original local composition by Lamberto Zarcal Camua, recorded right after the war by Cecil Lloyd, was Rosalinda, which may have been sung live on the air before the war. Cecil Lloyd, also known as the Mystery Singer, is known as the father of the Philippine recording industry, having put up in 1948 the Philippine Recording System, the first Filipino-owned record company. While the lyrics were mainly in English, there were lines in Spanish, another example of lyrical hybridization begun in the American colonial period. Here's Rosalinda.
Rosalinda, Rosalinda, listen while my heart whispers, I love you. Rosalinda, you're my angel, I adore you, believe me, I do. Señorita, oh Rosalinda, ora sueño de mi corazón. If your heart can be mine, let me kiss you. Let your red lips touch mine with a little beso. If your love can be just 'cause I love you, just a little kiss, dear, I beg of you.
By the way, Cecil Lloyd was a graduate of the UP College of Law in 1937, and he passed the bar with the grade of 85. When he sang live on KZRM and KZIB in the 1930s, he was known as the UP troubadour. As local compositions gained I only have 5 minutes and I have 3 more songs and I have a long paper to go. So let me just go through this very quickly. On this slide, what I mean to say is that the local songs and the local talent began to gain a wide following, and therefore many of them began to sing a lot of Filipino compositions. Okay, and then in the next slide I explained that this is perhaps can be connected to jazz, which, as we know, one of its characteristics is improvisation, and the Filipinos were able to adopt to the music, to the Western idiom of music, because they were very quick to learn jazz, and jazz allows for a lot of improvisations. And also, as mentioned earlier by Do, many Filipinos had to become so-and-so of the Philippines, like, Dick Powell of the Philippines and that sort of thing. And then in the next slide, I meant to say that there were a lot of singers and musicians from zarzuelas and from the vaudeville who began to join radio. And and in the next slide, what I wanted to show you are the next one. Some of the titles of the programs during the period, and you can tell that there were a lot of Tagalog songs, Tagalog programs rather, as well as programs in other Filipino languages. I also mentioned in the next slide that Balagtasan was also on the air, and I tried to connect it to the proclamation of Jose Corazon de Jesus as the King of Balagtasan in 1933. And he also went on the air, and some of his poetry was recorded and aired on radio. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about the vaudeville and its connection to what I call the block timers. Here I say that the popularity attained by the programs to a certain extent undermined the colonizers' project of Americanizing Filipinos, as the latter appropriated a foreign medium to insist on some expressions of the local culture. And no broadcaster did this with more impact and irreverence than the block timer. So I don't have much time, so I'm going to go through this quickly. They brought in their own production groups. They were not answerable to any radio station. They were their own production houses, so to speak. They brought in also the advertising of local rather than American products. They sang a lot of Tagalog songs, although they also sang American songs, but hybridized them, as already illustrated by Dr. Ancheta earlier in her presentation. And I was going to mention, the next slide has these. These are some of the advertising that they did, which did not have a chance in the American-sponsored programs. And the next slide shows 4 of the more popular block timers of the period. You have Tia Deli when she was much younger, Chichay there in the middle when she was much younger, and the husband and wife team of Andoy Balun Balunan and Deli Atay Atayan. And in the next slide, I show also, no, not yet. There's another one, Conde Ubaldo. Oh, we missed it. Okay, anyway, that's okay. I was going to say that the block timers, like I said earlier, used a lot of the vernacular. And they also recorded a lot of those risque. They put it on the air, songs, no, but not as risque as when they had it on stage, no, but naughty nevertheless. And here's one example of this, of a block timer's take on a folk song, Sit Sirit Sit, interpreted by Vicente Ocampo for Colombia, and now to be interpreted for us by one of our singers.
Magmula ng mauso ang balde sa restrom, ang lahat ng mananayaw ay mukhang tipaklong. Chichiritchit, alibangbang, sa lagintot, sa lagubang, ang babae sa lansangan, kung gumiri parang tandang. Magmula ng mapalo, dalaga sa batok, ang lahat ng babae ay mukhang sabukot. Chichiritchit, alibangbang, sa lagintot, sa lagubang, ang babae sa lansangan, kung gumiri parang tandang. Ang mga anak na babae, ni Tandang Nilo, ang napangasawa ay masamang amoy. Masamang amoy. Ay, chichirichit, alibangbang, sa lagintot, sa lagubang, ang babae sa lansangan, kung gumiri ay parang tandang. Ang mga nakaharang sa high school, ang karamihan ay nagbubulakbol. Ay, chichiritchit, alibangbang, sa lagintot, sa lagubang, ang babae sa lansangan, kung gumiri ay parang tandang. Chichiritchit, alibangbang, sa laginto at sa lagubang.
There were many such numbers that came from vaudeville, with their lyrics that may be described as mischievous, risque, and their simple, playful melody. These songs were also called novelty songs, which sometimes appropriated the melodies of foreign popular music. They were naughty, folksy, irreverent, and lively. Bienvenido Lumbera writes that in spite of the colonial agenda of importing cultural forms that could be addressed to the masses for the purpose of keeping them susceptible to the institutions and value system essential for the stability of colonial rule, national culture can emerge not only out of the interaction between various folk cultures, but also through both the inversion and reinterpretation of popular cultures. Music on radio during the American colonial period illustrates Lumbera's point. Amid the jazz, foxtrot, Hollywood ballads, and other popular American music, the local inserted itself with some pieces that may be described as radical and explicitly nationalistic, bewailing the colonial condition of the country, such as in the Kundiman pieces Hibik ng Pilipinas, Ibong Sawi, and Kantahin ng Ulila. Even the campy, vaudeville-inspired block time programs hinted of resistance. For example, in the song of Herman San Jose and Leonora Reyes titled Halo Halo Blues, the conflict between the local and the colonial is illustrated by mixing the original English lyrics of the popular American song Singing in the Rain and the Tagalog lyrics of a song that appropriated the measure and tempo of the first song. In the repartee between the performers, Reyes asks if San Jose has not gotten tired of English songs, then suggests that he sings Tagalog songs. San Jose argues that young listeners prefer jazz and modern music. Reyes retorts that there are listeners who like to hear their own language. In the end, they sing a duet. San Jose sings the English song while Reyes sings the Tagalog song using the same tempo and measure as Singing in the Rain. Let's listen to a rendition of this duet titled Halo Halo Blues.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds so dark up above. The sun's in my heart and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come one with the rain, I've a smile on my face. I walk down the lane with a happy refrain and singing, just singing in the rain.
Kinikilig kinikilig ang iyong, ang puso ni Hermang, binihag ng gusto. Kanlungan mo, Herman, agawin mo ngayon, kwerdas ng gitarang pangharana sa hapon. Oh, aking Herman, oh Herman ang aking buhay, kung di ako hahalikan, ako'y atay mamamatay.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds so dark up above. The sun's in my heart and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come one with the rain, I've a smile on my face. I walk down the lane with a happy refrain and sing, just sing in the rain. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come one with the rain, I've a smile on my face. I walk down the lane with a happy refrain and singing, just singing in the rain.
The comic routine between Deli Atay-Atayan and Andoy Balun-Balunan softened the otherwise sharp element of protest in the song Alila, Last Song, an allusion to the colonial condition of Filipinos. The slave in the song likens her oppression to that of her country and offers hope that she will be relieved of the cruelty she suffers. Here is Deli Atay-Atayan's Alila.
Sapos, minsan-minsan di nadala ng ginhawa ng loob, gaya ng bayan natin kahit na nasa gapos sa araw ng mga bayani napupuring lubos, gaya niya ring aking habang kalagayan. Sa lahat ng sandali ay nutusan, ngunit kung sumapit ang ganitong araw, ang mga hirap ko'y malulunasan. Gaya niya ring aking abang kalagayan. Sa lahat ng sandali ay nutusan, ngunit kung sumapit ang ganitong araw, ang mga hirap ko'y
The character of broadcasting then and now is that of a busy medium of competing channels that are expected to be on the air round the clock. This makes it receptive to all manner of programming. This presents opportunities not only for incoherent but also conflicting discourses. During the American colonial period, the necessity to fill radio's airtime allowed the suppressed culture to re-enter the public consciousness, rendering problematic the use of radio for the colonizers' purpose. The increasing presence of Filipinos in the broadcast staff in the 1930s, as well as that of the block timers, decentered control over textual production on radio as these Filipino broadcasters took charge of producing their own program material, even as they copied American formats of radio programming. In music, the musical traditions of the Filipinos not only survived the supposedly modernizing influence of American culture, our music flourished and took several turns even as it interacted with the music of the colonizer. Marami pong salamat sa UP Jazz Band, conducted by Professor Rayben Maige, and to our singers. Salamat kina Phoebe Vitoon, Joshua Cadelinia, Michelle Pascual, Jack Retulia at Nika Tupas.
Napahinggan natin ang Colonial Radio and Filipino Music Lecture ni Dr. Elizabeth Enriquez kasama ang pagtatampok ng UP Jazz Band sa pagdidirihe ni Professor Rayben Maige at music transcription and arrangements ni Ina Kayabyab sa symposium na The Vernacular in Philippine Literature, Dance, Stage, and Radio, The Roots of Transcultural Philippine Music na inihandog sa atin ng UP College of Music, UP Diliman Office for Initiatives in Culture and the Arts at UP Office of the Vice President for Academic Affairs. Maraming salamat mga kasali. Like our Facebook page at DZUP Specials. Abangan ang susunod na episode ng DZUP Special Features from Tuesday to Friday, 9 to 10 a.m. On Thursdays, join us as we highlight iba't ibang tunog ng college radios sa Pilipinas on DZUP Special Features College Radio Edition. Ako si Gian Librojo. Magandang umaga.